First and foremost, I'd like to dispel a common phrase that I hear an awful lot, and I think it leads to a great deal of misunderstanding among players on a project team. And the phrase is gathering requirements. Requirements can't be gathered. Gathering implies that requirements exist out on a tree somewhere and they're just sort of waiting to be discovered. They'll fall from the sky and we just pick them up and gather them. And wow, we know everything there is to know about this project now. Okay, it really doesn't work that way. And there are no existing requirements. Okay, requirements have to be generated. They have to be created. They have to be ideated through discussion with clients, discussion with users. You have to uncover this stuff. You have to uncover the needs and then make design decisions based on what you uncover. In a traditional requirements process, in my experience, very much of what's provided is based on executive opinion, technology preferences, or what customers claim they want. None of those things necessarily result in a good product. Opinions have no place in a requirements gathering exercise. Educated guesses, hypothesis, absolutely. But personal opinion? No. Sorry. There's almost always an IT team internally who may have a specific preference as to what the technology should be. That's fine. But everyone in the room also needs to be asking the question as to whether that is the right technology to solve this problem. Okay? Just because we think we might know what's applicable doesn't mean it's right. You got to test that theory, bear it out, ask a lot of questions, try to poke holes in it, and figure out whether it really is the right thing or not. And in terms of what people say they want, you're much better off trying to find some evidence of what their behavior is versus what they tell you. And this is something I've discussed before, but it bears repeating. What people say they want is not always what they want. What they say they will do is not always what they say they will do. So you want to be in a position where you can go shadow somebody and sort of watch them go through your day. In business-to-business situations, we do this a lot, okay, because the client will typically have a customer who has 40 people using this piece of software. So we say, okay, can we go sit with those folks for a day and just sort of observe? And 9 times out of 10, we're able to do it. And we learn a lot more about what needs to happen doing that than we ever could through conversation or guesswork, no matter how educated it may be. The other problem with the term gathering is that it gives the impression that our job is to simply take orders. You're a pair of hands. Make the design pretty, build the website. Just push your little code buttons and make technology happen. It doesn't work that way. You're in that room because you have a certain degree of expertise. You have a certain degree of understanding. Hopefully you have some degree of empathy towards the situation. It is your job to help figure out what the requirements should be, okay? You have an important skill set, an important knowledge that should be applied to that process. If you're just taking orders, there are 2 things that are happening. Number 1, you're devaluing your contribution. You're not nearly as valuable to that client or that organization as you possibly could be, and they will pay you appropriately based on that understanding of your value. The second thing that's happening is that you're not really helping them get to the right solution. And that too will come around back to you in some way as the project progresses. I can guarantee you that. And, God forbid the thing launches and it doesn't work the way people expected it to, or it doesn't achieve the goals that the business expected it to. I got news for you. That one comes back to you as well. So don't be an order taker. Add value. Seek to add value. Finally, without good processes in place, good tools to evaluate possible requirements, what typically gets kicked out and what stays is left to popular opinion and political compromise. Neither one of those things winds up in a good product. It winds up with a product that delivers value to customers and by doing so delivers value back to the organization, which is the entire point of user experience. So we got to take our opinions out of the equation. We have to be as objective as possible, and we have to make sure that we find answers as opposed to simply looking and waiting for solutions to drop into our laps. Another misunderstanding that I want to get rid of is the idea that requirements are the same as features. They're not. They're absolutely positively not the same thing, okay? Requirements are needs. Features are solutions. And when you're in the requirements generating phase, you want to be stating needs, not solutions. And here's an example of that. Instead of saying it has to be web-based, which is a solution, that's an answer. That's a feature. Instead of saying that, you want to say IT won't have time to install software on every PC. That is a need. There's a consequence attached to action. That's a need. That's what you're trying to achieve with a requirement. You're trying to fulfill a need and identify how you're going to fulfill that need. So what you do is you state the need first, and you give everyone the chance to see the opportunities and come up with better solutions. This is discussion. You're brainstorming, you're writing on a whiteboard, you're generating ideas. Give everybody in the room the opportunity to sort of chime in, right? And work together, leverage everybody's brain power. Part of the reason that needs are often combined with solutions is because people often communicate need by suggesting solutions. That's sort of our common way of addressing things. You know, if we're out in the rain and we're getting wet, we say, I need an umbrella. Well, that's a solution. But the real underlying need there is probably that you need to plan better, or you need to make sure that you need a mechanism for making sure you check the weather before you leave the house, or you need to make sure that your umbrella is packed in your bag at all times or under the seat of your car. The underlying need is very different from the at-the-moment solution. So you want to get everyone focused on the need behind the requirements instead of just taking those things at face value. Explore everything that everybody says and ask yourself, is that a need or is it a solution? If it's a solution, then that means someone's giving you a feature. And until you know something about need, you have no idea how to validate whether that feature is relevant, appropriate, or valuable. There are lots of different kinds of requirements, and I'm going to talk about the four most common here. In that, again, if you're not building some gigantic piece of enterprise software, you don't want to get bogged down in all this detail, and you don't want to be writing novel-length requirements documents. That's fine, okay? But dig into these four areas at least and ask some questions. Try to figure out what fits into each one of these categories. The first is objectives, and that's pretty simple. What does a user want to accomplish? What do they want to do? Why are they using this thing in the first place? And again, doesn't matter what it is, a website, an app, a system. What do they want from you? What are they trying to do? A functional requirement is a little more detailed. What does a user need to do in order to reach their objective? What steps are involved? How many are there? Are there multiple processes? Are there conditional things that happen? If they do this, then they get this option. If they do this other thing, then they get this option. Those are functional requirements. There are non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements answer things like what constraints does the site or app have to perform within, such as we have simultaneous users. We have the need to grow this system probably in the next 6 months because we have a plan to add 200 new employees in that time. Bandwidth limits. Our server will only support X amount of bandwidth. And if we go beyond that, we're going to have a problem. Okay, those are non-functional requirements. They're things that don't directly relate to the things that the user has to do in order to reach their objective. Non-functional requirements have a lot in common with specifications because they're not explicitly describing action. They're describing attributes. Finally, there are business rules. What dynamic constraints do we have to meet? And by that, I mean calculations, definitions, legal concerns. Are we allowed to sell this product in all 50 states, or can we only sell it in these 12 states? That's a business rule. The business rule says we can only sell this product in these 12 states. Or the business rule says we can sell this product in all 50 states. The business rule says there is no sales tax charged to California residents. Those things are all business rules. One of the best ways to generate requirements, which also happens to be my favorite, is to get a bunch of people in a room, right? Project stakeholders, users if possible, okay? But 9 times out of 10, this happens just with people on the client's team. You get everybody in a room and you create what are called use scenarios. That's a fancy term for saying we're going to sit down and think about all the different ways that the person is going to use our product, okay? They want to accomplish task A. How do they do that? They want to accomplish task B. How do they do that? What comes out of that process is something that looks like this. All right, this is a sample contracting scenario for insurance agents. This is a situation where someone who is not yet an agent has to use an online website, which is sort of coupled with a back-end process in order to, apply to become an agent. Then they have to get reviewed, then they have to get validated, and there's all these different things that happen during that process. So in order for us to figure out what should be on the screen and what the system should do at each given point, we first had to walk through, okay, well, what the heck happens? In this case, what we were documenting is what happens today, okay? How does it work today? Because if we could nail that down, then we could probably also see where the inefficiencies were in the process, or where we could potentially improve things in the process, okay? So all this really is, it's a bunch of boxes and arrows. The user does this, then he does this, then he's confronted with this, and he takes an action. All right, so in our case, if we go from left to right, we start with our prospective agent. He uses the website, he chooses a product, or he chooses a carrier. He starts in either one of those areas, but the end result of his action is he does something. He requests a contract. When he does that, when he clicks the request contract button, an automatic email gets sent to a third party who's then responsible for doing what's called scrubbing the application, okay? And that essentially means that they have to go through the application and make sure that everything is accurate and correct. And from there, what we were doing is we were referencing another abbreviated process. This is a very simple way of identifying all the steps that need to happen and the possible choices that the person needs to see at any given point. That's a use scenario. So all we really have to do in order to create a use scenario is to ask some questions, okay? And those questions are, first of all, who are the users at each point of activity? What information do they need? What actions do they need to take? What should the system do in response to those actions? What's it going to take to make that happen? For instance, we may diagram something like this, and the client may say to us, well, wait a minute, there is nobody in that second situation to scrub the app. We need the system to do that. Well, now we have a sense that, okay, we have to build something